All right, today we're going to start talking about the Pythagorean theorem. This is one of our favorite lessons that we teach throughout the year, so here we go. So what is the Pythagorean theorem? Well, it deals with right triangles. So it turns out that if you have a right triangle like this, that there are three sides. One is called leg A. The bottom we call leg B, or base. And in C, side C, we also call the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always the longest side of any right triangle. So if you see a right triangle that isn't labeled with any legs A, B, or C, just look for the longest side and you'll know that that is the hypotenuse, or C. So it turns out that according to a famous mathematician named Pythagoras, he found out that if you take the side lengths of A and B and square them, or basically multiply them by themselves, and then if you add those two numbers together, they will equal the length of the hypotenuse also squared. So we like to say a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. And what you're going to see today is that we're going to give you the length of A and B, and you're going to be calculating the length of C. Now I've got a little demonstration I'm going to show you. This is just a little video on YouTube that shows how this works in using a creative little device. So take a look at this. Okay, so here's the formula, and this is kind of a graphic way of showing what you saw in the video, that the a square, and it's literally the area of that square, and the b square, which is the area of this square. Add those two together and you get the same area as in C square. All right, so let's look at our first example. So we got A and B, we're looking for C, so we are going to square A and square B. And I happen to know that 12 squared is 144, and 5 squared is 25. And those two added together are going to give me C squared. So 144 plus 25 ends up being 169, and all of that equals C squared. Now to find C, I just have to unsquare it, or in other words, take the square root of it. So if I take the square root of C squared, I will get C. And if I take the square root of 169, I happen to know that it is 13. So by following these instructions, I've been able to figure out that C equals 13 units, whatever they happen to be. Okay, let's try another one. How about this one? We got C, or the hypotenuse, and we've got A and B already labeled here. So what's 4 times 4? Well, that's 16. 4 times 4 is also 16. And both of those added together are going to equal the hypotenuse, or C squared. So we're going to add those two together. So I'm going to grab a calculator and get that here to help me out. So 16 plus 16 equals 32. Now I'm going to take the square root of 32, and that turns out to be 5.6568. So we're going to just round it to the nearest tenth in this case. So take one more quick look at that. That was 5.65, so it's going to round to 5.7. Now on today's assignment, if we want you to round, we'll tell you what digit to round to and that sort of thing. So what we're saying is that C up here is about 5.7 units long. Okay. On this one, we've got a couple more dimensions. So if we do A squared plus B squared equals C squared, we end up with 4 squared plus 7 squared equals C squared. And 4 squared is 16. 7 squared is 49. And what's 16 plus 49? Well, grab our calculator. 16 plus 49, and that equals 65. So we're down to 65 equals c squared. Now to find what c is, we just have to take the square root of both sides of our equation. And so c is just going to be the square root of 65. So on our calculator, we take another look. We got 65. Hit the square root button, and that comes out to be 8.062257, and we're going to round it to the nearest tenth. So 8.1 if I round that number to the nearest tenth. All right, let's try a couple more. So number 4 here, we've got an altitude or an A of 10, and we got a base of 5. So using our Pythagorean theorem, we put 10 squared plus 5 squared equals c squared. And we know that 10 squared is 100. 5 squared is 25. And all of that's going to equal c squared. So to find c, we had to take the square root of what we were trying to look at over here. So let's go ahead and do that and get our calculator. So it's 125, and we do the square root. And we end up with 11.2 if I round it to the nearest tenth. So 11.2 units is how long c will be. And we're finding that out using the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, I think this is our last one. Just a sec. Yep, this is our last one. So we got a base of 6 and an altitude of 3. So we go a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So 3 squared is 9. 6 squared is 36. And all of that equals c to the second power. Then when you take the square root of both sides, you end up with c equals the square root of 45. Square root of 45, if we do that on our calculator, 45 square root 6.7 if you round it to the nearest tenth. So that's how you use the Pythagorean theorem to find the hypotenuse when it's the missing side of a right triangle. So let's get on to our Alex assignment. It's number 49. Pythagorean theorem, solve for the hypotenuse. Show your work on a piece of work paper, and make sure you submit your work and a copy of your score on Alex. Thank you very much.